Hello, my name is Mitchell Berry, and today we are having a panel discussion about the effects of carbon credits, especially in Brazil and developing countries. I've moderated many panels before for politicians in the past, and this is a very interesting topic for me. Please silence your cell phones during the panel, and please hold your questions till the end. Today with me, I have a group of experts who study carbon credits and their effects. I have Haley Hennigan, who is an economist studying the effects of carbon credits in developing countries and developed countries. I have a climate change scientist, Austin Stevens. He studies the effects of carbon emissions, and he also wants to know if carbon credits actually help with carbon emissions. And I also have Edward Henriette. He is an advocate for people in developing countries like Brazil, whose lands are being used as carbon credits. And he also works with the UN for these humanitarian causes. We'll have 4 minutes at the end for our questions. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the first question. Thank you all for coming today, and let's get this panel started. So Haley, the first question, I'm going to start with you. What is your stance on carbon credits?
Thank you, Mitchell. As he said, my name is Haley Hennigan, and I am for carbon credits because I believe they are good for both large and small businesses, as well as environmental programs within the corporate world. Carbon credits incentivize businesses to keep their emissions low, or for smaller companies, they can use it as a secondary source of income. So this all helps to reduce greenhouse gases, and I'm pro carbon credits because I believe they can help us be more conscious of our carbon emissions.
Thank you, Haley. I'm going to pass it on to you, Austin. What is your stance on carbon credits?
Thank you, Mitchell. Like he said, my name is Austin, and I'm an environmental scientist with the emphasis on climate change as well as a slight focus on economics. And I believe that carbon credits are good as they do help with the economic side in businesses and corporations, making them accountable. But I also believe that they have negative impacts as well because a lot of the businesses get away with the emissions that are released into the environment, and therefore the businesses lack the cautionary steps and it's not as thorough, therefore there's more damage to the environment holistically.
Thank you very much, Austin. And we're going to go to Edward. What is your stance on carbon credits, Edward?
So thank you, Mitchell. My name is Edward Henry, and I have been working with the UN and with the various populations in Brazil, and looking at the whole perspective, I am against carbon credits, and the reason why it's because it actually affects the populations and the native lands of the people in Brazil. These people resort to using trees as a way to have employment, so they cut down trees to sell the wood afterwards. And with carbon credits, this does not allow the people in Brazil from the native lands to be able to work and to do these things, and they're also actually being kicked out of their native lands so that companies can be able to buy these carbon credits. And that is why I am against carbon credits.
Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and go on to our second question, which is there a viable alternative to buying trees in Brazil instead of using native lands? And I would like to ask Haley to answer this second question.
Thank you. So yes, there are multiple alternatives to buying trees in Brazil. First off, the trees could be planted on company-owned land as well as public parks, or land owned by the government in general would be great. It can also be used in other ways that have nothing to do with trees. One tree only equals $1 in carbon credits, so from a financial standpoint, it would actually do the companies that are implementing these programs, it would be better for them to go with an alternative option anyways. Some offset providers allow you to choose exactly what you want to what kind of offset you want to buy. So there's a lot of options from wind and hydropower to biomass and reforestation projects. So if trees being planted on native lands is the issue, there are plenty of viable alternatives.
Thank you very much. Austin, is there a viable alternative to buying trees in Brazil instead of using native lands?
I do believe that there are viable alternatives to buying trees in Brazil, and one of those is intensifying the regulations that are implemented, because a lot of businesses and corporations are able to move around the rules a little bit and bend them, because the way that I'm relating the Kyoto Protocol here, the way that the Kyoto Protocol kind of created what is implemented today, they had to make it politically acceptable in order for it to actually work. Therefore, the regulations were a little bit loose, and it varied from nation to nation. So one thing that's going on right now in Brazil is the Zinga Resex, which is pretty much a organization that tries to help the indigenous people who are on these areas of lands that the trees are being taken from, and pretty much try to help them gain some sort of economic stability while also maintaining reasonable peace within the environment and ultimately just creating a higher standard of living.
Thank you, Austin. Edward, is there a viable alternative to buying trees in Brazil instead of using native lands?
I do believe that there's an alternative to, that other than carbon credits, and instead of using native lands, I believe that such as other countries in Europe have already started implementing vertical gardens on top of major buildings, and I believe that this is one of the major things that, for example, companies in the US should start implementing in their own country. Why should they come to Brazil and buy native lands instead of working in their own country? This is something that has really affected the natives, and not only is that one of the options that that exists, there's also many other options such as planting trees, because when companies buy carbon credits, they're actually only buying trees that are already implemented. They're not buying trees, they're not actually implementing trees, they're just buying what is there.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to go on to our third question. Do you think any benefits have come from carbon credits? So let's go ahead and start with Haley.
So along with the financial benefits of purchasing carbon credits, they can also be used towards reforestation projects to plant trees in areas that are rapidly losing their trees. This also helps startups and small businesses to generate extra income from the carbon credits, and that's only if they are able to trade and sell the carbon credits. This can also be a benefit to the countries where trees are being rapidly lost, because this would help them with the budget of implementing reforestation programs. And obviously, if all those efforts translates into a cutback in emissions, it's good for the ecosystem as a whole.
Okay, thank you, Haley. Austin, do you think that any benefits have come from carbon credits?
I do believe that there are benefits that have come from carbon credits, as relating back to the Kyoto Protocol in the 90s. It's really the regulations that have been implemented have helped, as it's really brought it to the forefront that before that it wasn't really that known, or nothing was said about the carbon that was released into the atmosphere, whether it's carbon dioxide or methane. But ultimately, I believe that the carbon credits, if they're implemented correctly, that they can really help the environment and things such as reforestation, and ultimately just building up the environment rather than breaking it down and stepping away from the carbon-based factories and sort of trying to rebuild using carbon credits and having that more responsibility aspect of it.
Thank you, Austin. And Edward, do you think any benefits have come from carbon credits?
Unfortunately, I do not believe that there have been any benefits that have come out of carbon credits. People believe that carbon credits, it's a good thing, but unfortunately companies, this is just a way for them to get around the system and to buy land instead of actually reducing their CO2 emissions. The money that is being used, so for example, when Brazil sells land to companies, this money is actually not used to be invested into planting new trees or to find other energy sources that would not contaminate. This money is actually being used for their own luxuries in the government. Unfortunately, because Brazil is a really corrupt country, the government officials use the money that is being earned from these carbon credits for their own use.
All right, thank you all very much for your input on that question. We'll now move on to our fourth question. What is the Kyoto Protocol and how does it affect carbon emissions? We'll go ahead and start with Haley, please.
Thank you. So the Kyoto Protocol was the first agreement between nations to mandate country-by-country reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. This is measured across 6 different greenhouse gases by varying amounts, and this affects carbon because it basically incentivizes countries to be more intentional about their greenhouse gas waste. So yeah, they just need to be more intentional about their usage.
Thank you. Okay, we will now move on to Austin. What is the Kyoto Protocol and how does it affect carbon emissions?
So the Kyoto Protocol pretty much established a plan for controlling carbon and limiting pollution. It also addressed global warming, like I said, on a larger scale, and it also sort of had commitments that varied from nation to nation. And I believe that it affects carbon emissions because it allowed for a large group of nations to actually see that they had to change the way that they acted upon whether it was business or corporation wise, because the amount of carbon emissions in the environment were harmful to the future of the globe and whether people could maintain in the atmosphere that is getting polluted daily. Therefore, carbon emissions just kind of limit that. And although it does, like I said, vary from nation to nation, there still are things within each nation that are trying to limit the amount of carbon. Therefore, carbon emissions are very positive.
Thank you very much, Austin. And Edward, what is the Kyoto Protocol and how does it affect carbon emissions?
So the Kyoto Protocol is basically a way for countries to be more conscious about the carbon emissions that are happening in their own country by the companies that are producing the CO2 emissions. Unfortunately, I do not believe that the Kyoto Protocol is something that works because the Kyoto Protocol only basically transfers money from a wealthy nation into a third world nation. This does not benefit in any sort of way what is going on with climate change. And that is why I am not for carbon credits.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our final question. Explain the economic benefits or negatives of carbon credits, in your opinion. Haley, we're going to start with you.
So really, I think that the economic benefits of carbon credits can be seen at almost all levels of business. For example, in India, if someone wants to start a wind farm, carbon credits can be rewarded to them for offsetting the carbon dioxide produced, and they can sell those carbon credits to companies who have already met their max for carbon emissions. And without this secondary source of income, the power company may not have been able to finance the wind farm. This can also be seen for farmers and ranchers in some states like California. Farmers and ranchers can be rewarded for having higher amounts of carbon in their soil. And consumers can also participate by purchasing and trading carbon credits and will make a profit when large companies meet their maximum outputs. So in summary, the economic benefits of carbon credits are accessible to everyone.
Thank you very much, Haley. Austin, please explain the economic benefits or negatives of carbon credits, in your opinion.
So I believe that there are positives economically, and I believe some of those are the renewable energy certificates, also known as green tags, which are implemented in the United States, as well as Chicago Climate Exchange, which is a trading front for carbon emissions. But I also believe there are some negatives with it because it changes people's perspective from trying to help the environment to more of a financial gain. So countries that are MDCs who are able to control their carbon output better because they're more enabled to do that, are able to take advantage by selling their carbon credits, which is also people can do that. You can sell your carbon credits to countries that pretty much need them because they rely so much on factory production and releasing the carbon into the atmosphere. Therefore, there are both positives and negatives in the economic implications, and this is partially why I believe there are both positives and negatives of carbon credits in society today.
Thank you, Austin. And last but not least, Edward, please explain the economic benefits of negatives of carbon credits.
So economically, carbon credits has had a positive impact, I would say, in the economy. So in Brazil, like I stated, it's a way for countries to transfer really from a first world country economy to transfer money into a third world economy. This is a benefit, and of course, there's other sort of carbon credits, not only besides buying land from natives, but such as solar panels and other types of renewable sources that count as carbon credits. This is, of course, a positive impact that carbon credits has had in the economy. It's also a way for companies to invest into third world countries. But unfortunately, carbon credits also has its negatives. Like as I stated before, carbon credits removes people from their native lands, in Brazil specifically. and this also economically it affects it because people who rely on selling trees actually lose their jobs because of this, and no new jobs are being created because of this, and that is why I believe that carbon credits are bad.
Thank you very much. That concludes our panel for today. I would like to thank you all for coming out here today to listen to this very important topic about climate change, which is affecting us all greatly, and hopefully how we can do something about it with carbon credits. Edward Stance, he is against carbon credits because of its effect on the native populations in developing countries, and he also finds some benefits economically, but not enough to outweigh the downfalls. Austin is both for and against carbon credits. He is a neutral standpoint, and he believes that it makes us somewhat more conscious of the environment, and it has some economic benefits, but he also sees the downfalls, and he sees viable alternatives to buying trees in Brazil. There are a lot of viable alternatives, as they all stated, such as solar power, windmills, and other viable alternatives. Haley is also for carbon credits, although she sees some downfalls. She mostly sees how they positively affect the economy, and small businesses can benefit from businesses. I'm going to open the floor for questions. Does anybody have any questions for 4 minutes? Yes, please.
Are carbon credits just another way of helping rich countries to meet Kyoto Protocol targets?
Thank you very much. I'm going to direct this question to Haley, since she's our economist. Haley, is carbon credits just another way of making rich companies richer and poor companies poorer?
Thank you. And no, I would say that there are benefits for everyone, and I would say that even the underdeveloped countries that are seeing the repercussions, I guess, of carbon emissions, they're the ones who are getting to profit off of it, because they're the ones who are either having the trees planted on their lands, planting the trees on their lands, or having wind farms, or whatever their alternative is for offset carbon credits. So they're really the ones profiting off of it. They're making the money off of the big companies not being able to fulfill their requirements. So, no, I don't think so.
Thank you, Haley. Yes, please.
Yeah, I have a question for Austin. So what do you think of deforestation?
Austin, what do you think of deforestation?
Thank you. I believe that deforestation is a large problem, especially I like to focus a lot on Brazil because that's an area where it's very prominent right now. The Amazon rainforest, which a lot of people are familiar with, there is a lot going on there where the trees are literally being chopped and burned down, and just for farmland and for realistically economic gain. And it's really sad to see because it's part of the environment, and also there's no replanting of it. It's more turned into just cropland, where the land is literally just, used for crops like daily and for every year. Pretty much it just takes everything out of the soil and takes everything out of it to where it's not really able to host trees in the future. Therefore, it's almost defeating the purpose of trees even being there. Therefore, it's just a negative impact. And I'm just overall against the deforestation, especially in Brazil.
Thank you very much, Austin. We have time for one more question.
Yeah.
Yes.
What has happened to native lands in Brazil?
I'm going to address this to our native advocate, Edward. What has happened to native lands in Brazil?
So what has happened right now with native lands is that people that live in native lands are actually forced to move from their land, because when companies buy these carbon credits, as in land and trees, nobody's allowed to live in those areas. So the people are actually forced to leave. And also, when it comes to planting new trees, it's kind of the same thing. So whenever some native lands have crops and they're being forced, and a company buys that land to plant trees, which does not happen often, they're forced to move around also.
Thank you very much, Edward. That concludes our question and answer time. I would like to thank our experts for joining us very much, and I hope you guys all enjoyed hearing about carbon credits. Thank you all for coming very much, and this is the conclusion.